Okay, by now I'm sure everyone here at least has somewhat played through the new outdoor subfloor indoors. Whilst you were playing though, you may have been wondering why certain things were the way they are. For example, why is iStock just a carbon copy of Seek? That just seems kind of lazy, doesn't it? And why is the Groundskeeper fighting Bramble in the subfloor's ending? Well, all of those are questions that are explained through the hidden story within the subfloor, and I aim to expose that story in this video. We'll be diving into what exactly is going on in the outdoor subfloor, and in the end, I'll reveal to you possibly the strongest entity we have ever faced in the history of the game. We have got a lot to discuss in this video, so with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so there are two main sources of information about the lore of the outdoors, those being Curious Light and Grampy, which are both characters that can actually speak to the player, so I guess it makes sense, as they both have dialogue explaining what's going on. The lore centers around an entity known as the World Lotus, a giant pink lotus flower resting on top of an absolutely massive vine at the end of the game. Based on Curious Light's dialogue from When You Die to Bramble, the final boss, the World Lotus is responsible for the vine infestation found all throughout the outdoors as well as in the other floors, such as the hotel and the mines. Every time you see a thorny vine, whether it be part of an entity or just as a decoration, it's connected and controlled by the central World Lotus at the end of the subfloor. Now, despite this thing appearing innocent at first, it is far from it, even though it is just a giant pink flower. It has very unique abilities that make it one of the most powerful characters in the entire game. However, how do we know that? Well, that's where Curious Light and Grampy come in. As you may have been able to tell, the World Lotus has a super expansive domain in which it is present. You can find this thing literally everywhere, in the hotel as well as the mines, in addition to all throughout the outdoor subfloor. It is an omnipresent force. However, the most horrifying thing about the World Lotus is its unique ability to take control of entities. In the cutscene for the iStock chase starting, you can see the World Lotus vines infesting a fallen log to use as a body, and in a particularly rare room, you can find the same thing happening to a monument. And this is particularly terrifying because it means the World Lotus can infest living beings in addition to inanimate objects. In fact, the ability for the World Lotus to mind control living beings is likely why the Groundskeeper is fighting Bramble at the end of the subfloor. Throughout the entirety of the outdoors, you'll find the Groundskeeper fighting a variance of the World Lotus. For example, they straight up just kill iStock as well as mandrakes, which is a plant that is also infested by the thorny vines. At first, this behavior may seem like a mistake. However, that's until you talk to Grampy. Grampy is a friendly entity you'll encounter after the iStock chase, and they seem to be the father or a father figure of the Groundskeeper. I say father figure and not biological father because the two look nothing alike, but I'll just still keep the possibility of them being biologically related into the mix. Based on their dialogue though, it appears both he and the Groundskeeper are against the World Lotus and its influence, as they've taken several precautions to stop it from spreading. For example, Grampy carries around these special purple flowers with vine-killing properties, and of course the Groundskeeper kills mandrakes that reveal themselves to the players. This is why the Groundskeeper fights Bramble at the end of the subfloor, as he is trying to stop the World Lotus from expanding its influence, likely because of how it can control living and inanimate objects. In fact, it's also the reason why the Groundskeeper wants players to stay off the grass, as when players do walk on the grass, it attracts the attention of the World Lotus vines, which, as we've discussed, will probably attempt to control you. So in this sense, the Groundskeeper is actually trying to save you. Now, the fight between the Groundskeeper and the World Lotus is cool and all, but how does it relate back to the broader story of the game? Well, besides how the World Lotus has influence in other floors. Well, it all comes back to Curious Light. Now, we've known for a long while that the light characters have the ability to manifest objects into reality, such as timer levers in the back door, as well as the little valves in the dam. And although most of the time it's just things to help players progress, I believe Curious Light themselves created the ever-present threat of the World Lotus. The pink lotus petals you can find all around the map have Curious Light's starlight bottle particles floating around them. And the giant World Lotus itself is covered in triangle particles, things which only appear around stuff relating to the light characters, such as the rifts. Now, Curious Light creating the World Lotus would actually tie into a previous theory I had about them, that being how they aren't there to help the player, merely just to test them. Based on Curious Light's dialogue in the rooms, we know the character has information about how the entities function, but for some reason they choose not to tell the player, willingly. I believe this is because they are actually testing our skills, observing what we do in entirely new situations, and this subfloor further reinforces that idea. Curious Light tells us yet again in the outdoors how they choose not to give us information willingly. They even say they are just observing us and nothing else. It's entirely possible the World Lotus was created by them as a part of their test for us, to see how we would react to an omnipresent all-destroying force. However, it appears things got a little too out of hand. As evidence has come to light, get it? Curious Light, evidence coming to light? I thought that was clever. Anyways, it proves that the World Lotus has gotten too powerful. And now it's creating surprises not even Curious Light, a figure who is basically a god in the Doors universe, can anticipate. This can be seen notably in two main examples. For one, Curious Light has no clue what mandrakes are. As I've said, they typically withhold information from us willingly, but this time they just don't know anything about this entity. When you die to one, they state how it's their first time interacting with the entity as well, and they have a couple of other dialogue lines which further prove that claim. Mandrakes, as we've discussed, are entities controlled by the Lotus Flower, so that means Curious Light hasn't anticipated at all what it has in store. Additionally, when the player dies to Bramble, Curious Light states that they are surprised at how powerful the World Lotus has become, which is further evidence of how the entity is evolving faster than Curious Light can anticipate. This could mean that eventually, the World Lotus could become a problem so great not even the architects can handle it, and given how the player doesn't really defeat it at the end of the subfloor, it's likely still alive and will continue to grow, this means we could be seeing the World Lotus and other vine-infested entities in future floors, which definitely would be quite crazy, as that would mean the World Lotus has indeed continued spreading. All in all, the outdoor subfloor tells the tale of how an uncontrollable force is spreading across the entire game, infesting anything it comes across to gain more control, whether it be alive or inanimate. It also tells the story of how a party of individuals, notably the Groundskeeper and Grampy, are trying to save the game by taking precautions in order to stop the World Lotus's spread, such as planting vine-killing flowers and fighting off the World Lotus when it attacks. However, as Curious Light described, the World Lotus is getting to become such a powerful creature that not even himself may be able to anticipate what it will do, and that's pretty scary. And that also could spell doom for the entire ecosystem living within the game. Anyways, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments what you think of this new lore in the outdoor subfloor, as well as what your own theories are about this entire topic, as although I covered a majority of it, I'm sure I missed something. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.